Welcome back to the channel. In this video I'll be replacing the wiring harness connector for the engine cooling control module on my 2014 Chevy Caprice PPV. The reason I'm doing that is for this reason. You can see the connection on this part of the wiring harness into the control module got overheated due to a poor connection at some point, and it melted the connector. And I'm going to replace the control module itself and the two other wiring harness connectors to the individual fans. You may have seen my previous video where I replaced the fans because one was completely failed and the other one was very loose. But I was able to find a replacement by the fact that I went to a local wrecking yard. They had a 17 Caprice that has a connector that is in good shape. Luckily I was able to cut that off with their permission without having to buy the whole engine bay wiring harness. One thing I wanted to pause the video and clarify here is the reason I did not purchase just the electrical connector parts to replace the ends on the wires here is, one, the insulation on the wiring itself had been hardened by some sort of high heat thermal event, and two, I was unable to locate a vendor that was willing to sell them when I was researching this project. But I did find a vendor at the time of editing the video that had them, but you had to order a minimum of 10. So for me, it was a lot easier to simply source the parts from the wrecking yard and install this pigtail. But if you want to use the parts on the screen to at least find the electrical connector, please do so. And I'm going to use some butt connectors, uninsulated, and put some heat shrink wrap over the connections. I'm going to stagger them in the wire, and I'll cut that off on the engine bay side and then replicate that staggering in this harness pigtail. And then I'll be replacing the controller with this one because the car that I pulled this out of had about 34,000 miles on it, and these look to be in much better shape as well, at least clean, and they're unmelted as well. So with that, I'm going to start cutting off the one in the engine bay, and then I'm going to bring it up here, try to do the soldering with my wire clamps there to hold it while I'm crimping and soldering it, and get it installed. Then we'll test it with the scan tool to see that it's working correctly, and if it is, then we'll call it a job well done at that point. But let's get to it. I've moved the coolant hose partly out of the way here to at least open up this area here. I'm going to open up this covering because I have the other one that I cut off from the pigtail over there, so that I won't have a seam in it when we're done. But I'm going to cut it back to about here so that I can see the wires, and then I'm going to stagger the wires so that I have the butt connectors at different points so we don't have a bulky connection at any one point. I'm going to make sure that the bend is at least taken care of. Once we see that, let's see here, see that the bend takes place, so the butt connector should be somewhere between here and here. Let's open up this covering. This one's actually quite brittle compared to the other one that's very flexible. So this definitely was exposed to some heat. That's extremely brittle. So I can see that this was overheated and propagated up the wires. So enough to crystallize the plastic here, harden it. I've already disconnected the car's battery. So, and even now it's resistant to go back on, so it's definitely a good thing I'm replacing it. Alright, so I'm going to let's go with the ground here. That's go there. And butt connector there. So let's stagger that up. So the butt connector will go about there. Let's make the positive one here. And then the control wire somewhere in here. So we've staggered them to allow for the easier placement in the overall wiring harness so they don't get so bulky, and it's after the bend here. So let's take this over to the bench and work on getting the wires prepped on the other pigtail so that they have the butt connectors already on that end. Then we'll come back over here, strip these down, get the connectors crimped on, and then solder these in. I have a fan running in the background. It's quite hot today. We have a lot of heat going on here and ash falling in the sky, so I apologize if you hear that fan noise. Alright, we have the one from the car with the melted connector, and I'm going to make the cuts on this one just a little bit further down so we can have just a hair more wire to work with here. So I'll go about the length of the butt connector just so I have a little bit extra wire here to work with. Yeah, the wire coating on the positive lead here is hard. It's not even flexible. That did get overheated. Again, just to give a little more length in the cable, that's all. And then this one, control wire. Get this out of the way. Use the same length here. So this is the old one that won't be reused. This is the replacement one that will be reused. And then we'll have the butt connectors with the insulation. There will be heat shrink style coverings, and get that protected. Then we'll, on the car side, before we, well, this is actually the bad one. Here's the one that I got from the salvage yard one, and it's nice and flexible. So I'll slide this over, and then we'll tape this up here to try to get a waterproof barrier again of some sort up by the wiring harness where it goes into the main engine bay wiring harness. Alright. So I'm going to strip it just a hair beyond that. We have a little space to put the solder in. So we have that in there. This is a 1012. So let's crimp that. This has a pedestal to rest on over here to twist this up. We have the wires exposed over here on the engine side of the harness. I've taken the replacement outer cover and scrunched it up here and put the zip tie on it to hold it back while I'm working on the wires. And I've got the shrink wrap connectors over here on this side, and actually it might be beneficial to put them further away from the heat. So let's see if I can keep that up there. And for now, so I've got the negative black wire here, so I'm going to crimp this on, then add some solder to the end of it. And I'm going to take into account the orientation of the wiring here. Make sure I don't put any extra twists into it here. While the electrical connections at the butt connectors are cooling down from the soldering, I'm going to pull the control module and the two wiring harnesses to replace it with the one I got from the 17 Caprice. The camera battery ran out, sorry about that. We have the replacement unit screwed into with the two bolts here. We have the cables routed to the two different fans. Top one goes over to the driver's side or left, and the bottom one goes to the right fan through the harness routing points, and it's connected to the fan motor on both. Alright, now let's get the shrink wrap put back in place and then get this all covered. So let's do this guy up at the top first. Alright, we're going to let that cool down for just a minute. Then I'm going to come back and try to run this down here and then tape this up on the top end here, but let's let that cool down for a minute. These have cooled down sufficiently where I can touch things, and the connections are all covered. So I've already removed the zip tie that was holding this back, so let's bring this down over the wires. The fact that we staggered them should make it so that we can get this all the way down here. All right. I'm gonna put a little zip tie up here, small one. Cut it down, at least make it small. Because the original one was kind of rolled over into a little ball here, so this should at least hold it up here.
Not very much tension there, just enough to keep it up around it. And now, if we focus down on the controller here, we should see that this will reach it nicely. And again, this is the one without the burnt ends. Otherwise I just put the wrong one on, but now it's the correct one. And hopefully we can just put it on and hear it snap. There we go. The other one I couldn't really start without fighting with it. So that's all the way on. Actually, it looks like if I can route it around here, it might be a more natural path for it. There we go. That way it's not rubbing up against the headlight or harness up here. Alright, we have this connected. Those are all connected and soldered. And the fan harness portions are on. This is bolted in. I'm going to go ahead and reconnect the negative cable at the battery, and I'm going to put the air inlet tubing and have that ready to go. Then we're going to go start the car and then use the scan tool to activate the fan at the various speeds. Alright, we have the engine started after doing everything, and we have the fans that are already running, the AC's on. So I'm going to go into my scan tool here. We have the ability to change the speed. Right now the ECM has already got it commanded to 8%, that's why we see the fans on. I'm going to command it to 40%. It's ramping it up. And I hear them running faster. Alright. And let's go 70%. Working. Alright, let's go 90%. Commanded to 90%, it's at 89. I'm going to let it run there for just a moment, make sure the electrical current draw is going through those connectors and see how they look or feel like afterwards. So at 90% command. Alright, I'm going to escape out of that particular cooling fan function. See if I can easily feel down here. Wires feel just a hint warm, barely anything warmth there. Before, when I would touch those, they would be quite warm. It's hot. Engine bay right now is not extremely warm, so I know the thermal factor is going to come in from just the engine bay heat soaking, but that's a good sign. We were able to control the fans in all the way up to 90%. The control module did its job, and let's see if you can see it here. Both fans are running.
Well, there we go. We have the new engine cooling fan control module in place, or the replacement one from the 7T Caprice, along with the 2 wiring harnesses to the individual fans, and then what ended up becoming the pigtail out of the engine bay from the 7T Caprice that I crimped and soldered in to the engine bay harness on mine. And we've been able to control the fan from its original 8% commanded by the ECM up to 90%, and both fans are running, and it seems the heat factor in the wires is appropriate, so looks like this is a job well done. So if you like this kind of video for your Caprice or other vehicles I have, please come back and check out the channel and my other videos. If you like the content of this video, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and make sure you hit that bell notification to be notified when I upload new videos like this to the channel. I'll see you in the next one.